This is Cynthia Abulafia, author of Embodying the Goddess, How to Awaken Curiosity and Reverence on the Spiritual Path, out January 2026. Thank you, Monkfish. It has been so beautiful to have this book out there. Before I go forward in this conversation, which is going to be about the goddess Kali, before I go into that conversation, and we have a lot to talk about, I want to name the three major rivers that come into our bodies in this place and time. We are encoded. We have genetic predisposed histories. I've talked about my own before. We have family lines. Sometimes those lines are hidden, sometimes they're not hidden. We have genetic and epigenetic tendencies, traumas, patterns of beauty, patterns of sacred, patterns of abuse. We have all kinds of connection within our ancestral lineage. That's how we are encoded. We are also embodied. Our souls come into form. Those souls have karmic records. We have memories. And if you remember any of your past lives, that has to do with embodiment. What is the practice? What is the reason? What is the lesson? What is in this classroom, in this body? And how are you pulling on that record to come into this embodiment? Because this is a very limited, condensed, contracted form of consciousness. We're going to really see all about that today when we really do talk about Kali, but really this aspect of embodiment is a huge part of our personal history, and we can cultivate memory toward that. I think most of my love of the Dark Goddess comes from this stream of embodiment. We're also embedded in this place and time. I happen to live in coastal California, so I am embedded in the land under my feet and the vibration that comes up through that land that is told through the ancestors that have lived here before me. I'm also embedded by my culture, by the political landscape around me, by the things that people are interested in, the things that people talk about, by the weather of how we communicate within our specific time, place, and culture. So having said that, as you go into understanding who the Divine Feminine is for you, what the goddess means to you, do please understand that you are encoded, embodied, and embedded. And she can play in any one of these streams, or maybe multiple streams. But it's very important to understand so that you can really feel into your body who she is, why she is, and how she is for you. Now, Kali to me represents many things. She's very particular. She is that goddess. Although I'm not as connected to how she's been presented as like this blue goddess who is naked and has the arms as skirts. I do love the skull necklace. But to me, Kali is this ray of sun who lives in the center of our being and is pure consciousness. And as pure consciousness, in the earliest texts that describe her, they describe her as being the dynamic rays of perception. Not just sight, but what sight grabs onto in the external world. Not just touch, but how touch experiences the textures and temperatures of the world. So the rays of the senses that radiate out from the center. At the center, she is considered sometimes by many different names, but as that pure consciousness, as the void even, totally without qualities, without limitation, without form. So much so that after the early Krama texts that describe her in these 13 different forms, the 12 forms of the rays of consciousness, plus the 13th at the center, certain teachers like Abhinavagupta get rid of the 13th at the center. And there's reasons for this. But Kali has this relationship not only to time. Now, of course, there's Kala, time. She is the one that devours time. That's her name. Her name is the devourer of time, Kala Samkarshini, the one that is emaciated and skeletal and hungry and terrifying, because what is it that time does? Time devours. The moment you experience the moment, that moment is being devoured. Time eats everything. It eats beauty, it eats pain, it eats grief, it eats our relationships, it eats our whole life. So time is part of that element, part of that dynamic sense perception of being alive. But so too is space. So she is space-time. She is the rays of the senses that are space-time. In some of the traditions, she is described as the one that vomits forth all of reality. So this quality of that which comes out of the mouth, as well as that which devours back in through the mouth, is deeply related to this dark earth goddess. Many goddesses, as you've heard me say before, are connected to sound vibration, which is pulsation. What is sound vibration? Sound vibration, frequency, is pulsation. It has a peak, it has a trough. It expands, it contracts. This is why so many traditions speak about the mother tongue and the mother earth. The mother tongue is sound vibration, the alphabetic reality. Mother earth is what happens when sound vibration condenses and becomes more or less elemental and solid. But can we also see that Mother Earth is the giving and holding of the sense organs onto their objects? Because what exactly is sense perception? It's elemental perception. It's perception of Mother Earth. So Kali is deeply connected to long chains, long histories of mother goddesses. These mother goddesses that are sometimes described as the sun, that are sometimes described as the 16 digits of the moon, the 16 lunar phases. And she is even described sometimes as the 17th phase, again, to be at the center of those radiating rays of the 17 phases of the moon. So the planets are deeply connected to Kali, but then also to so many other earth goddesses. Other goddesses that I would consider dark goddesses, and when I say dark goddesses, what I mean is goddesses connected to Mother Earth and space-time, to the elements and to sound vibration. Other goddesses that connect to this are Lakshmi. So in some of the early texts, Kali is described as the senses of Lakshmi. It's one of her origins. So there's this great, beautiful goddess of abundance, Lakshmi, in a tradition that actually Kali does not come to be identified with in later texts. Kali comes to be identified not with Vishnu, but with Shiva. So you have this other earth goddess who is much more about fecundity and abundance. But she has these double sides. She has that life-giving quality, but she also has that skeletal, all-consuming, full of hunger, full of rage, full of terror. That consciousness which eats and devours and vomits as well, all of reality. These interplay with each other. Other traditions where we might see the similar complexity of a single goddess who is an earth goddess as well as the great wild would be Artemis. She has many different forms. We think of her as the huntress or the goddess of the moon. But in some traditions, she has very deep connections to very specific animals like the bee, the humming bee. And in some traditions, she has connections to very strong, deep, one might even say severe practices that do include sacrifice. Because what is the letting of blood to the goddess? The letting of blood to the goddess through animal sacrifice, sometimes in history, human sacrifice, but also sometimes through the fluids of the body, especially the female body which bleeds. That is a relationship to the elements that this body is constantly interfacing with. And now I've talked about before many times how the physical human body has a very complex relationship to history and tradition. Some histories and traditions really don't like the human body, but especially find it terrifying or polluting what comes off of the body, and culprit number one would be menstrual blood. It's really the fluid that cannot be controlled. It can't be controlled. Other fluids can more or less be controlled to some extent. Menstrual blood absolutely cannot be controlled. Not only that, but when you're in the presence of a female-sexed human, you don't really know whether she's menstruating or not. Now, in the traditions of my encoding of my ancestry, the Jewish traditions, this created some serious mistrust of women and a lot of hatred toward the female body, a lot of suppression, a lot of putting that female sexed body into a place of really representing that which is polluted, but especially around menstruation. So Artemis is one of these wild goddesses who represents the multiformity of the sense elements, the animals, the nature, and a very deep history with earth and with human form and with body and relationship. Another tradition that has this connection to what I would call a dark goddess, the goddess of the wild. She's usually related to the moon on some level, right? So these dark goddesses would be the Isis, Hathor, Asherah, Praxis. There is this kind of Egyptian Semitic connection to this very deep and ancient goddess. And a lot of times these goddesses, especially in that praxis, are related to healing. So it's beautiful because this dark goddess can create disease and she can heal disease. She can go out and hunt in the woods, but she can also punish others who are going out and hunting in the woods as well. So the thing that she has authority over, she can take it both ways. She can do it, she can limit it, she can punish others for it, she can demand it. In the case of Isis, not only is she a healer, but she's also deeply related, especially in connection to Hathor and Sekhmet, to sound vibration. Sound vibration, again, we're coming back to create and destroy, that which goes out and that which returns. Now, if we go further back, even before the Bronze Age, we have another dark goddess who I particularly love, and that is the Sumerian Ereshkigal. A lot of us may have heard of Inanna or Inanna/Ishtar, who is one of the great goddesses of that time period. But her sister, Ereshkigal, was the goddess of the underworld, of death, before she was forced into marriage with the male deity who then took over the realm of death, because that's just what the patriarchy did. But originally, Ereshkigal was this great goddess who monitored the realm of death. And in one of the stories related to Ereshkigal, there's this tremendous act of compassion. It has to do with Inanna's descent into the underworld. She makes her way down to the underworld. Great story there. But she's down in the underworld, and she gets judged and killed and hung up on the wall. Her attendant, who comes looking for her, who goes out and gets these two tiny little beings to go after her mistress, go down into the underworld. They kind of are so tiny that they go down into the underworld. Related to the moon god, just so you all know. They come out of his fingernails. these two tiny little beings see Ereshkigal, and she is devastated. She is lamenting the death of her lover, consort. And it's described as though she's in labor. So she's racked in these spasms of pain, this very physical pain. And every time she says, "Oh, I hurt, oh, I hurt," these two little beings, they mimic her. "Oh, I hurt. Oh, my heart. Oh, my heart. Oh, my liver. Oh, my liver." And she takes notice of these two beings. And this is how Inanna does get freed from the underworld. You have here the story of a dark goddess engaging in deep mirroring of compassion and empathy and relationality. So even in these dark forms of the goddess, the subterranean down under, compassion, mirroring, empathy, sound vibration, song, connection to earth and element, and the radiating of the senses, these elements all come together. And they're echoed across traditions and across timelines. We have so many traditions and timelines that talk about these forms of these goddesses. Let's go back to Kali one last time. In this earliest stratum of Kali texts, where she is described as the radiating out of the senses, and she really is mapped. She can even sometimes be mapped according to the 12 zodiac suns, where each Kali represents a sun in the calendar, and the 13th comes around every 3 years. So nowadays, we don't talk about Kali in this way. Nowadays, she is more of an archetype to many people, East and West. She represents that which is fierce and that which kind of gives you the tough love. But she's so much more than that, right? That's kind of her being reduced down to this one single form that has a certain shape, color, and outfit. But at her core, she is how consciousness comes into being. And we don't need to look outside of ourselves to see that. We can track our own consciousness to see that indeed there is a void at the center of our being. I talk about this in Embodying the Goddess, the void layer of our being, the deep inner core of being and not being, the fullness of emptiness, the emptiness of fullness. And from that, how we radiate outward as intuition, thought, emotion, physicality, and the elements, all in a continuum. I hope that you learned something about the dark goddess in general, and maybe something about this very early medieval form of Kali from about the 700s to about the 1200s, this really medieval form that was taught in Kashmir and across and through Assam and into Nepal. She has many different homes in many different countries. She continues to be loved in very certain places in these forms. And I also hope that you have an opportunity to feel into how you are encoded, how you are embodied, and how you are embedded. Because some of these goddesses may be looking through your eyes and feeling through your skin, through the sense organs, into their sense objects of your being. And it's kind of nice to know what their history is so that you can become a devotee and understand a little bit better something that moves in you. Blessed are the ones that love the goddess. Blessed are the ones who remember the heart.